Thank you, Philip. Nyagadef, Caribou, Sanu Dazor, bienvenue, welcome. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our final plenary speaker on day 3 of our conference. So the sub-theme which we're focusing on here is Sustainable Development Goal number 4, around inclusive, equitable, quality education and lifelong learning for all. The title of the session, as I hope you can all see on the screen, is Uwezo Citizen-Led Assessments, Inspiring Debate about Children's Learning and Holding Governments Accountable. Yesterday, we heard the voice of government in our ministerial panel session, and today we're going to hear from civil society. And Goretti, I know, is a very passionate representative of Uwezo, and she'll say more about the organization and its mission. So Goretti is, Dr. Nakabugo is Uganda country lead of Twaweza East Africa and acting regional manager of its Uwezo program. This is Africa's largest citizen assessment of children's learning levels in literacy and numeracy, operating in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. She's worked as Senior Lecturer of Higher Education Studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and as Senior Lecturer and Head of the Department of Curriculum, Teaching and Media at Makerere University in Uganda. But it's not so much in her capacity as a distinguished academic that she's here to speak with us this morning, but in her role as a lead of Uwezo, the civil society organization. Goretti has agreed to speak for 40 minutes. So this is a 50-minute session. She will speak for approximately 50 minutes, and then we have 10 minutes for questions and discussion. So it's a great pleasure. Please join me in welcoming our plenary speaker this morning, Dr. Nakabugo. Over to you.
John, for the kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. Normally, the last sessions, the last days are for the resilient ones. So I'm so happy to have a big audience on the last day. Thanks for coming. I think over these last days, from the different sessions, we have heard about the power of language and how emotive it is. Just imagine yourself on a turbulent flight, right? Have you ever been on a turbulent flight? I have ever been on one. When somebody is swearing or calling God to help, in which language do they speak? Have you ever imagined in a very emotional situation, thinking about it, talking in another language? No. We first think and react in our immediate languages. So this back to the theme of my presentation today, which is basically about citizen-led assessments and how we use the evidence from these assessments to hold different stakeholders, including government, to account for children's learning. I remember attending the keynote address of Barbara Trudell on day 1 on Monday. In that presentation on globalization and curriculum in African classrooms, she referenced different international assessments, including PISA, TIMSS, and she made a critique that those assessments are mainly suitable for developed countries and really not suitable for low-income or even middle-income countries. So here today, using an assessment that originates from the South, a developing country, originates from the South, implemented in the South, and implemented by the Southern people. So that is mainly the focus of this presentation. But first, a bit of background to this. So in many developing countries for several decades, measuring progress towards achieving global education goals has focused mainly on visible things, call them the inputs. The infrastructure, how many classrooms, teachers and books, are there teachers and books in the classroom? But also on the number of children enrolled in school. In fact, the previous education agenda in the EFA goals, a lot of focus was on getting children into school. And most developing countries were proud to report on the number of children enrolled in school. The fact is, actually, as a result of that focus, school enrollments are very high in most developing countries. Very, very high. Actually, many are almost achieving universal primary education for all. But the sad reality is that many children are in school, but not learning. Not even the basics of reading and counting. But then how do you actually make this visible? Because most governments in the developing countries will actually say children are in school and they're learning. So how do you visualize this? So citizen-led assessments actually were invented or innovated really to visualize this learning crisis and present it in a very simple way, simple language, and make responsible people, especially government, accountable. So in the next few slides, I present the evolution of these assessments. They originate in India. Are there some participants from India here today? Hands up. Great. Okay, so in 2005, India's largest NGO called Pratham realized that there was a problem. Just as I've explained that problem in the different developing countries, many children in school, but few learning. So they realized that the learning levels were actually low, but they had no evidence to present this to government and the different actors. So they mobilized citizens in villages across all districts in India to undertake a household survey of learning using a very simple tool. Somewhere in the presentation, I will show you how simple this tool is. And they went and assessed children in literacy and reading in the households. Please underline that word households, not in schools, because this is one of the key differences between the usual assessments and the citizen-led assessments. So within 100 days, India had the results of its ever annual status of education report, codenamed ASA for short. So that gave birth to ASA, or the ASA report, which actually in Hindu means impact. It's not just an abbreviation. It has a meaning in Hindu, meaning impact. And if you were to actually be proud of your education system, you need to know the impact that it's having on the lives of children, including the acquisition of basic skills, which are important to survive in the real world. So the results of the assessment were a huge surprise. Government and many stakeholders couldn't believe how appalling the situation was. So, among children aged 7 to 14, children who had gone through at least 2 years of primary education, up to 7 to 8 years of primary education, only about half, almost a half of them could read a story at grade 2 level. Others could not read it. And about 35% of the kids aged between 17 to 14 could not complete a division task of 3 digits at primary 2 level. So, of course, what do you expect the government's reaction to this? They rejected initially. They rejected the findings and asked, who is this Pratham? It's an NGO, it's a civil society. Who are they? They are not academics, but they are close to the people, just as our organization is. So that did not stop Pratham to continue doing these assessments every year. Actually, every year they have been doing this assessment, and they received a lot of widespread media coverage and public debate. By the way, for actors in civil society, or even academics, media is very powerful. Government listens to media than anybody else. So once the media went into this and a lot of debate was going around, government got attracted and discussions started happening in Parliament and action started. So in a way it was holding government to account for the low learning outcomes of children. So in 2005, after the debate all over the country on the initial report, central government decided to allocate money for district learning enhancement programs. Very instantly, there was an impact. And in 2011, the new 5-year plan of India stressed measuring of learning and improvement of basic skills. That was as a result of the findings of the citizen-led assessment in India. And by 2015, almost all states had done their own state-level learning assessments, again spurred by the little initiative that started in India by Pratham. Right. That was not the end of the story. So this success story of the ASA approach inspired several other citizen-led assessments on 3 continents, including Africa. So in 2009 in Asia, next door neighbor, Pakistan, heard about this success story and went to India, to Pratham, to learn about the ASA citizen-led assessment. They also named the assessment ASA because I think being neighbors, the languages, some languages are quite similar. And as I said, ASA means impact in Hindustan. So Pakistan came on board and started implementing these citizen-led assessments. And here we come. That is why I'm here today. East Africa comes on board. And by the way, is there somebody from Pakistan here in the audience? Right. I guess you have heard about ASA Pakistan, I'm sure. And do we have representatives from Kenya here? Tanzania? Good. Uganda? I'm carrying the whole country on my shoulders. Okay, Uganda, I'm here. So under a regional East African organization called Twaweza. Twaweza is a Swahili word meaning we can make it happen. We, the citizens of East Africa, can make it happen. So it was pretty easy to get attracted to this citizen-led assessment because it's citizens doing it, the citizens of East Africa. So in 2009, we went to India to learn and get lessons on how the citizen-led assessment is done. One thing about citizen-led assessment is that it's not a copycat. You learn and go and adapt the methodology to your own context. So in 2009, we went and we coordinated our own citizen-led assessment, Uwezo, which is the one in the title of my presentation. And Uwezo, again, a local language, Kiswahili, means capability. So we do undertake assessments of learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy of children who are aged between 6 and 16 across Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And Surprisingly, Pratham in India started getting grandchildren. Because when we came in East Africa and our story was successful, other countries got interested in Africa. Starting with Mali. Is there a representative of Mali here? Grand. And have you heard of Bekungo? Bekungo is, again, the citizen-led assessment in Mali was adapted using a local language. Bekungo means the concern of everyone. Learning is a concern of everyone, not only government, not only academicians. Civil society is part of this. So it started in 2011, and Uwezo, which had learned the methodology in India, is actually which initiated Mali into this movement. Come 2012, Senegal came on board. Anyone from Senegal? Wow, of course. They're very good hosts. So, and the one for Senegal was named Jangandu. I'm sure the people from Senegal are familiar with this Jangandu. And Jangandu in Wolof means to learn together. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Jangandu. I have to get lessons after here. So it's a large-scale citizen-led assessment that it takes place in Senegal. And in 2015, Nigeria came on board. Again, Uwezo East Africa is the one which initiated these other countries. And the one for Nigeria is named Learn Nigeria. It is short for Let's Assess, Engage, and Report Nigeria. Anyone from Nigeria? Good. And this is implemented by the Education Partnership Center based in Lagos, Nigeria. We crossed the borders. Now Latin America came on board. Anyone from Mexico? Anyone from Mexico here? No one. Okay, I can represent Mexico. So Mexico joined in 2014, and this one was initiated or inducted into this methodology by India itself. And the one from Mexico is called MIA for short. I can't pronounce these things in Spanish, but it means independent measurement of learning. So as we speak right now, many other countries have come on board. And at the moment, citizen-led assessments are implemented in 14 countries on 3 continents. So just in summary, the history of citizen-led assessment in numbers, just as I've said, 14 countries. It has a history of 11 years. And this assessment is done by over 600,000 volunteers across these 14 countries now implementing. And very relevant to the theme of this conference, this assessment is undertaken in over 30 languages. So you have French, English, Portuguese, and many other local languages. Of course, if language was not also a costly issue in research, there would be more languages, but at least we are making baby steps to ensure that different languages are represented in this assessment. So combined together over the 11 years, we've been able to assess over 7.5 million children in literacy and numeracy. So because this has grown into a very powerful family, operating in silos was not a desirable thing. So in 2014, we came together under one umbrella body called the PAL Network, the People's Action for Learning, PAL Network. It's housed in Nairobi, but it brings together all these countries doing citizen-led assessment to ensure that we are focused on one goal, bringing learning at the center of education practice, education policy and practice, but also ensuring that there is learning across the different countries. So at the moment, there's growing interest from all over the world of countries joining this movement to undertake these citizen-led assessments. And just an example, we have interest from the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Peru, Swaziland, Indonesia, and we are really open to sharing the good learnings that we've learned over the year to ensure that the citizen-led assessments spread. But anyway, in the next few minutes that I have left for this presentation, I just wanted to return in some depth to the East African citizen-led assessment called Uwezo, to share how we have implemented these assessments and how we have used the evidence from these assessments to bring the debate, the issue of learning at the center of policy and public debate, but also to hold our governments accountable for the learning of children. I've already mentioned how the meaning of Uwezo, but our idea is very simple. We send children to school because we expect them to learn. It's like when you take your car to a garage, you don't just want the mechanic to give your car opportunities. Some garages even offer teas, a cup of tea and a soft drink. But that is not what matters. What I want is my car to get fixed, to go back on the road. The same applies to education. When parents send their children to school, what they expect is these children to learn. Let them learn how to read, count, and many other skills that there are these soft skills now, the 21st century skills, all those skills that they need to thrive in this world. So instead of us asking for the opportunities that the education system provides, number of classrooms, number of teachers, we ask one major question: are our children learning? That is what makes me wake up every day to try and answer this question. They are going to school, but are they learning? So in order to undertake and answer this question, the citizen-led assessments, the one I'm referring to Uwezo, but we basically are guided by the same principles. We have 5 main principles for these assessments. First of all, we assess basic skills, including reading and simple arithmetic. We have been critiqued over the years that, why are you only assessing literacy and numeracy? Education is not about literacy and numeracy. And we are saying, well, it's the foundation. If they can't read, if they can't count, it's very difficult for them to acquire higher skills. So it's a foundation. We assess children orally one-on-one. Most assessments are undertaken using paper and pencil and pen. But those assessments which are done, written assessments, assume that children already know how to read. But many children can't read those questions. So that is why we decide to assess ours orally. And obviously, the issue of language here comes in. If you're assessing them orally, are they able to understand you? Do they speak your language? Do you speak their language? So that is an example of a tool that we use. It's more or less modeled on the same structure across the different countries. Very simple. That is a language tool. This is an example of English, but we have many other examples from the different languages. And maybe the main focus here could be on, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, the last one, the last bit. So the highest level of the literacy tool is a story of 2 paragraphs, depending on the curriculum requirements for every country. And that story is based at a primary 2 or grade 2 level curriculum with the 2 questions of comprehension. And this is administered to all children between the age of 6 and 16 in East Africa. So you can see that, for example, the first level, which is about letters of the alphabet, or letter names or letter sounds, a grade 1 child is able to, they should be able to read that. So up to the highest level, which is the story level. Okay. So another principle is that we assess children in their home. Very, very important characteristic here. Why do we want to assess children in their homes? Because that is where you'll find a good representation of all children. In developing countries where dropout rates are quite high, absenteeism is quite high, the only place where you are able to find most of the children is in the household. You go to a school on a certain day, you will only find those who are able to come to school on that particular day. But also assessing in the household has this issue of trying to bring the parents and the communities into the conversation of the learning of their children. We use local volunteers to assess children. So these local volunteers are recruited from their communities. In East Africa, under the Uwezo assessment, at least they should have a minimum of 4 years of secondary education. So they are trained to do this assessment and do the household survey. And lastly, we communicate these findings regularly. Research that is not communicated to relevant audiences is not really helpful. So we communicate these findings, and most importantly, we want these findings to reach the public and governments to be able to act. So that is just an example of extracted from our 2015 assessment in Uganda. And we normally use infographics to communicate our findings. And just in the middle there, 54.2 children between primary 3 and primary 7 were only able to at least attain the basic competencies of reading in their local languages by the time they were in primary 6. So they take long to acquire these skills of reading. So anyway, I think in the shortest time that I have, let me use at least the example of the principle of using volunteers, local volunteers, to assess. Very many academics will ask, or very sophisticated researchers, you are using local volunteers? Of course, even government asked us, why are you using volunteers to assess learning? Why not teachers? And we are saying, citizens, volunteers are part of the community. They are citizens. They are concerned about learning themselves. But also you want to make this assessment as independent as possible. So if a teacher teaching these children is again the one assessing them, how independent is that assessment? So we get these independent volunteers in the communities, at least 2 per village, and rigorously train them to do the survey and the assessment. So these are the main strengths of this model. The volunteers speak the language of the child and the parents. That is very, very important. So the communication and the conversation already happens in the home. So this makes it possible for parents to engage and understand the assessment. 2 of the sessions that I attended on day 1 and 1 yesterday. Day 1, I think, was by William Savage. He talked about the power of listening and being listened to. That is also powerful in research. The people being researched, the subjects of research, once they understand, they feel they're being listened to. And of course, language plays a powerful role here. They actually respond and are ready to act on the findings of the research. So on the part of the children, working with local volunteers who speak the language of the children makes it possible for the assessment to be administered in a conversational tone to ease tension with the child and make them comfortable. These volunteers are known in the communities, they speak the language of the children, so it's much easier for them to assess the children than a teacher who has been exported from a different community to come and speak to them. And the local volunteers, especially those at the minimum level of education, senior 4, senior 6, are very loyal to the standards of assessment. It's like a Bible. You tell them, do A, B, C, D, they will do it. We have experienced that a few sophisticated graduates actually take shortcuts. So there's power in using local volunteers and empowering them. They will follow the rules of the assessment or the research to the dot. So, but there have also been a few challenges working with the volunteers. The first one I've mentioned is government questioned, why are we using volunteers, not teachers? So they took quite long to accept that actually ordinary citizens can assess learning. And actually this has been validated. There's a study that was done by ASA, that is Australian Council for Education Research in 2014-2015, and they tracked the reliability and validity of our assessments using volunteers, and it's really, really validated. They are very, very reliable. Same results generated by volunteers, same results can be generated by the professionals, so it's perfect. So retention of volunteers, especially the young ones, is a challenge because they're always on the move looking for opportunities. So we've realized that if you want a real good volunteer, look up for settled members of the community with a qualification and train them. They actually, there you can retain them. But also finding qualified volunteers in remote areas sometimes is a challenge. Sometimes we have to go to the neighboring village or sub-county to find a qualified volunteer. But also in Africa, the issue of voluntarism. Voluntarism is not straightforward. Even volunteers sometimes want to be facilitated. So to find a real genuine volunteer who would do things for free of charge is almost not there. So there are costs involved in sustaining the motivation of the volunteers. So basically, I think, to moving towards the end of this presentation, the power of these citizen-led assessments has been in bringing the issue of learning beyond access to the center of education discourse. The SDG 4 agenda that we are talking about here, our assessments played a very big role in ensuring that access plus learning was part of the development agenda. The recent World Bank development report actually references citizen-led assessments, and the opening statement of that report, for those of you who have read it, the recent World Development Report, references Uwezo assessments and argues that going to school is not the same as learning, and they use evidence from citizen-led assessments to make their point. But also the evidence from our assessments have catalyzed a focus on improving learning, especially early grade reading in our respective countries. The different interventions by development partners in partnership with government, for example, in Uganda, the RTI, School Health and Reading Program, they use assessment evidences, including the citizen-led assessments, to actually argue that there's a lot of value in investing in early grade reading or the foundations of learning to build strong education systems. The same applies to DFID's current Uganda education strategy. There's a focus on developing strong systems, foundations in literacy and numeracy, mainly drawing from the evidence that we have consistently and overwhelmingly presented to them. So the relationship with media is now looking for actually evidence. They always look forward to when we release the reports every year because they use that evidence to argue for improving learning in the country. So, and then we use this evidence to engage with the government without fear. Once you have evidence, you are fearless. You can say anything because you are backed up with evidence, and that's what has happened. Just an example there of the media, that is me in the center when we launched our 2015 report, and media literally swarming to get a voice of the evidence that you are presenting. Well, the last bit of this presentation, holding governments accountable. Is it an easy space to occupy? It becomes quite easier when you have evidence. But even when you have evidence, governments are good, they support us, but sometimes they are quite difficult to engage with. So I compare the reactions of government to our findings to day and night. I'll start with the night. No trust. We don't trust Uwezo's methodology and use of unqualified volunteers. You know, when you say that a huge percentage of our children are not able to read and count, that is one of the reactions. We don't trust them. The methodology, the volunteers, who are they? That is a Ministry of Education official in Tanzania. Just negative. Instead of saying that 30% of children are learning, they say that 70% are not learning, just being negative. So that is a PS in Kenya, permanent secretary, former PS in Kenya. Not learning is not unusual. It is really not unusual that in every class there will be children who are not learning. Children are not equal. That is the former cabinet minister, cabinet secretary of education in Kenya. And this is a very recent one. A sports minister, I mean, we have a ministry which combines sports and education in one. This is the minister of sports who got across one of our reports recently, and he completely disowned it. He said, he described the report as malicious, since the assessment parameters were not systematic and their credibility was questionable. So that is night. But when it suits government, show us value for money, Uganda government tells teachers. So in March 2015, the Uganda Teachers National Union threatened to go on strike. And around the same time, we produced a report comparing Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania in learning outcomes. And of course, Uganda was trailing terribly. The top bottom districts in East Africa were all from Uganda. And government jumped onto this report. They told teachers, show us value for money. Even the little money that we are giving you, you are producing low learning outcomes. So when it suits them, then they own this report as being valid. Of course, with these mixed reactions, it pushes also teachers to go on the defensive. When government tells teachers, show us results using our report, they will definitely come and bite us. So this is a chairperson of Kenya Union of Teachers. He says, Uwezo's assessment is an abuse to teachers. I have not met a single teacher who confirms that the assessment was done in their school. Remember, our assessment is done in households. Anyway, but the day government sometimes, and actually many times, is receptive to these findings. This crisis of learning is unfortunate to Kenya's development. This was in reaction to an Uwezo report in Kenya by the Director General of Kenya Vision 2030. Uwezo findings have provided a wake-up call. This is the former Minister of Education in Tanzania. And this is a late former Minister of Education in Kenya who says, contrast this to his counterpart, who says it's usual for children not to learn. This is a counterpart who says, even if only one child is not learning, let us be told about her. So engaging with governments and holding them accountable, it's like day and night, right? So anyway, I've talked a lot about the strengths of the citizen-led assessments, particularly the strength of working with local volunteers and doing the assessment at the household, sometimes, or in most cases, in languages that are familiar to the children and the children and the guardians. But there are also some limitations that we are grappling to address over time. Much as we say that when you assess in the household, you are able to reach all children, the truth is that there are some populations that we are not able to reach. Children on streets, children in foster homes, children in refugee settlements, but also children in boarding schools, because we do this assessment on a weekend during school time. So children in boarding schools are not really included. So we are over the years trying to close the gap, to widen the reach and inclusion of the different children. So, for example, of recent in Uganda, we worked closely and got support from DFID, Uganda, and we have implemented and piloted this citizen-led assessment in refugee settlements in Uganda, in 4 districts. So we hope to scale this up in the coming years. That is South Sudanese volunteer assessing a South Sudanese child. Again, the power of language here. If you are in a refugee settlement, who is going to assess the children? What language? You would rather empower a local volunteer within that context to assess the children, talking to them in a language that they are familiar with. Of course, there's the inability to assess children with severe disabilities. Assessing the blind, for example, the deaf children, we haven't been doing that because we don't have the capacity. So it's still a limitation to us. But also the focus on the basic literacy and numeracy, we listen and we are hearing this, and we are exploring ways of trying to include the assessment of a few soft skills, social and emotional skills, into this large-scale assessment. This is really work in progress. And of course, also ensuring the comparability of assessment within and across the 3 countries. Our countries implementing citizen-led assessments have different environments. They use different curricula. So trying to actually compare findings across the countries is something that we try as much as possible, and ensuring that the tests at the same time, but also ensuring that these assessments follow the national curriculum of that particular country. So that when you are saying that primary 3 kids are not able to read a primary 2 level story, that story is at the level of that country, of that curriculum. So, yeah, I think I've talked quite a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah.
For a very powerful and passionate presentation, showing us how the citizen-led assessments have grown and developed over the years, now spanning 3 continents. That's a really strong indicator of success. And also, thank you for showing just something of the impact of that work in holding education stakeholders, particularly governments, accountable for learning and performance in the classroom. Also, I think, in reminding us of particularly academics and researchers amongst us, of the need to communicate the findings of our research and our work much more widely. It's just so easy for us to be complacent and report in the journals and speak amongst ourselves, community of practice. Are we really getting the message out there to the wider community? And I think Uwezo and the PAL network is demonstrating how that can be done in very powerful ways. Also, I think for the challenge that as an organization using volunteers and training local volunteers as data gatherers, I think that is another challenge really to the academic and research community. Can we actually be more inclusive in our approach to research and the human resource that we use. So I think terrific food for thought. We've got a few minutes for questions and discussion. So if you'd like to put a question to Goretti or make a comment on her presentation, now's the time to do so. So we have one person here at the front table, one person just behind, and a third person on the left-hand side, second table there. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Susan and I'm from England. I noticed that in your presentation you said that you were not able to include disabled children in the education program, and particularly blind children and deaf children. I hope that you will be pursuing the integration of these children. But I've got a question relating to dyslexia. Do you have any way of assessing whether or not children are dyslexic, so that if you're doing an assessment and they are unable to read or write, do you look to see if this is an impairment which they have? And my experience in England was that when I was leading a Youth Opportunities Drama and Education program in 1981, something like 25% of my students could barely read or write. They were perfectly intelligent, but they couldn't read or write. They were unemployed and they just left school. Now, it was not until much later that I was working with another gentleman, and he was in his 50s, and he cannot read or write, and he said that it was not until he was over 50 that he was diagnosed as dyslexic, that he spent his entire childhood being branded as stupid, but in fact he's got an impairment that is known as dyslexia. And I wonder, do you make any assessment for these issues in your program?
From Mauritius, 2 questions. Do you think citizen action therefore can lead to change? And second, how would you define an engaged scholar?
Merci. Je suis Tambangom du Sénégal. Je félicite Madame de son exposé et dis que comme Uwezo, j'ai eu la chance de participer au programme Djangando pour le Sénégal. Et pour juste une édition, nous avions choisi les enfants de 9 à 16 ans. Et ce qui est important ici, c'est qu'on n'a pas choisi des élèves, mais on choisit les enfants âgés de 6, par exemple, de 9 à 16 ans, qu'ils aient été à l'école ou pas, ce n'est pas un problème. Donc c'est là peut-être où l'ONG que je représentais avait vu un petit problème, parce que l'évaluation concernait le niveau médian, ce qu'on a appelé le niveau médian. Le niveau médian, c'est le C1, C2 pour le système sénégalais. Et là, il fallait tester les enfants qui ont été à l'école ou bien qui n'ont pas été à l'école pour la même épreuve. Donc du coup, après avoir demandé à l'enfant s'il a été à l'école et qu'il te dit non, ça veut dire que déjà on savait qu'il n'allait pas réussir. Alors, ce qu'on a remarqué par contre, c'est qu'il y a effectivement des enfants de 16 ans qui sont en seconde ou en première ou en terminale qui malheureusement n'ont pas pu réussir une évaluation qui était destinée à un élève de C1 ou de C2. Donc du coup, le changement que ça induisait, c'était quoi? Fallait-il changer de paradigme? Parce que l'élève qui a atteint un certain niveau et que malheureusement n'a pas pu installer les compétences requises ou bien les aptitudes qu'il fallait, ça posait problème. Donc, ce que peut-être que les conclusions auxquelles nous sommes parvenus, c'est qu'il était temps que l'école revoie les besoins de la communauté, changer de stratégie et d'approche pour pouvoir avoir l'élève dont ils rêvaient. Voilà exactement. Maintenant, la question que je voudrais poser à madame, c'est, après avoir fait 4 ans d'évaluation ou 5 ans d'évaluation, est-ce qu'il y a des remédiations que vous avez proposées au niveau de l'Ouganda? Et qu'est-ce que...
The comment on including children with disabilities, yes, it's something that we are continuously thinking about. It's quite a challenging issue, actually. But in terms of actually at least measuring the extent of disability among the population that is surveyed, we are adopting the Washington tool on assessing disability in all our different countries. But of course, that doesn't take away the issue that we are not able to assess children who are blind or deaf. So, and the dyslexic kids, again, we are not really able to assess this because our volunteers and us are not actually professionals. From the colleague from Mauritius, does citizen action lead to change? Yes, it has potential. I think the examples that we demonstrated here, right from India to a bit of East Africa, once government starts reacting and responding to the findings of a research, even if they react negatively, it means they are listening and they're touched. So they have potential actually to lead to change. How do we include schools? Much as the assessment is done at a household level, so in every district, we survey 30 villages or enumeration areas, and in every surveyed enumeration area, the school where most of the children in that community are enrolled is actually automatically included in the survey. So we visit the school and introduce the assessment, but also take data on some indicators of the school. For example, the number of teachers, those who are trained, the attendance, the enrollments, the infrastructure, so the schools are quite included. But we realized that actually the assessment results were not trickling down directly to the teachers. Now we have included in our budget of the assessment what we call village disseminations, whereby much as the data is not really representative at the village level, it's only generalized at the district level, the findings at the village level can kickstart a conversation. So we invite the village community leaders, but also the school representatives to be part of those disseminations. Yeah, and the issue of Senegal, do you want me to respond to that? Or very. So have there been any improvements on the assessment ever since we started? We continuously try to improve the assessment tool as time goes on. As I said, for example, one of the things that we are really thinking of doing, but it will have to be tested over time, is the inclusion of assessment of some skills beyond literacy and numeracy. So it's something that we are thinking about. But also in 2016, we tested or piloted the issue of assessing beyond the basics. So we use the higher kind of level assessment tool done actually that time at the school level to see whether the volunteer model could be used at a higher level. So we continuously think about improving every year. Sorry.
So just in concluding, quick word of thanks to our volunteers here at the conference, the unsung heroes, working hard behind the scenes to ensure that this session, ran smoothly. Thanks to William, our room manager, Peter here, my colleague and rapporteur, our timekeeper, and our interpreters. But of course, the biggest vote of thanks goes to our plenary speaker for that very passionate and articulate presentation. Please join me in thanking Dr. Nakabugo.